Hello fellow glue sniffers and sprue snippers, welcome back to Modelcollect Modelworks. These are some of the figures I'm going to be using for my Modelcollect E-60 build. I've got a few left over from this set. I've used a few. This set came out in 96. Yep, 96. And we're going to be using this figure for the driver. This figure for the commander. I'm going to try and make both of his arms level because that's the shape of the cupola. And we're going to be using this figure for the radio operator, or bow machine gunner. There's no bow machine gun in this, so he's the radio operator, and I'm going to try and have his arms more or less horizontal as well, so he's kind of sitting with his arms up over the hatch. Additionally, these figures all come with their heads separate. This is the commander figure I'm going to use. And that's where it fits. These are his arms. And you can see a nice solid plug where the sleeve should be hollow. So one of the things I'm going to do, and this is a figure I'm working on for a totally different build. As you can see, I have removed the hands and hollowed out the sleeves. Although you can't really tell with the way the shirt worked out and the body armor. I did the same thing with this guy's head. So what I do is I extend the heads and the hands once I remove the hands from the arms with some evergreen styrene. And then I putty and flare everything back in and make a hole with a rotary tool and a dental burr. I actually use some real dental burrs. Talk to your dentist about that. Mine just gave me a whole bunch. And this allows us to position the hands how we want. We can twist them and we have a little bit of articulation, the same with the head. So I'm going to cut these off and start cleaning them up and show you how I do all that. So I've got the parts off for the driver, and hopefully I can get this so it stays focused. The face isn't too bad for 1996. His head is supposed to fit on more or less like this. You can see it's not bad, but there's some fit issues. You could fill it in with some putty, but I'm going to extend his neck. I'm actually going to file it flat with a short flat file because it does have an angle to it. There you go. And then with the body, I am going to take an actual dental bit and I'm going to plow this out right to the edge, enough so this collar can still roll over. And when the extension is dry, I will fit it so I can put his head in, and I can even have his head turn still at whatever angle we need. But it seems everybody's going to have their heads turned to the left or right a little bit. His neck's a little bit too wide to fit the little piece that I have. So what I'm going to do is I've got this big sheet of styrene, and I'm just going to glue his head to a block on the end here, kind of like that. And then I'm going to trim everything off once it's dried up. I left lots of room on the sides, so I'll have lots of room to work with. Don't cut it off too short. I'm going to cut them fairly far back and then flare it in. That I just glued on to a flattened toothpick. It'll get cleaned up and painted right on there. This is the commander's head. I'd forgotten how bad this figure was. It doesn't look too bad other than the rough features and lack of detail in the cap. The rough part's really in the back where, you see, like behind his ear, the cap just turns into a giant glob of plastic that goes all the way in the back of his head to the other ear. I suppose you could hide that with the headphones that are in the kit, but I'm going to carve all that out and clean it all up before I do the neck extension. There we go. A little bit of cleanup using a fresh 10A scalpel blade and a very slow, careful hand. Come on, there we go. I'm not worried about the hair on any of them. I will fix that on all of them once the neck extensions are on, and then I can glue on a toothpick so I have a little bit more to hang on to. So now he gets his, oh, gotta clean up his ear a little bit. No, it's borderline okay. And I'll move on to the next guy. This is the driver's body. There's a few little sink marks in there, so that's some Vallejo putty. Didn't have to do anything to the arms, they fit nice and fine. But you will notice that I did clean out the molding underneath the collars and the lapels. So this is the radio operator, and you can see how horrible that looks. And this is typical of all older types of figures, even some of the current ones. Limitations of molding technology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carve these out with a dental tool. And I have a couple of these. This one is a very, very sharp pick. This is what I use for the initial cuts. And then I have some others I've reprofiled. This is more for scribing lines. Same with the other side. So these have been reprofiled with sandpaper and sharpened up for different uses. Too thick to go under here for the first pass. You could use a knife. I have done that in the past, but you run the risk of damaging some details if you're not very careful about the angle that you go in at when you're doing your scraping. So I'm going to do that and hopefully not mess any of this up. we go. A little bit of patience, a little bit of digging. If you use a knife blade, it'll just take you a little longer and you got to be a little more careful. But that should look pretty smart under a coat of paint. Heads have all had the extensions done. We've carved out the plastic lump behind the commander's head, given him some ears. He doesn't have any hair though, and that's kind of a problem, because one of the other guys, radio operator, he's got a lot of hair, but you can't really see much of anything. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can make hair. You can make it out of putty. I've seen people do it out of epoxy putty. You can use your dental tool and kind of rake it very carefully. You can use the tip of a knife blade and do the same thing. But I'm going to use something a little different. That's the results that gives you. I use something, I know it as a power grove, or it's basically a soldering iron with a knife blade on it. This is mine. Got this about 30 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. You can actually still get it. The company's still in business. That's how old it is. There's no website on here. I've had this for like 30 years, used it quite a bit. The new one, I don't know if you get the box, but it looks pretty much the same, except this is yellow. Be very, very careful when you do this. This thing gets insanely hot, and this is a sharp new, or it was new when I put it in to do the other guy here. It was a new scalpel blade. So be very, very cautious when you do this, but it's very easy to do. Take your time. Do a little bit of practice, maybe on some scrap, and let me get this thing heated up and I'll show you how it works. Clean up with some steel wool, maybe some Tamiya liquid cement. We'll see what happens. I've got the commander positioned in the turret. I've got him standing on a little platform I glued inside. You can tell there are some not insignificant gaps that I have to fill. I'm going to fill those with milliput epoxy putty, at least just to fill them, to give them some support. And I'm going to have to do some sculpting for some wrinkles in that because the fabric will be pulling in different directions, so I'm going to put that in probably with milliput as well. I'll probably have to do a little bit of carving, but not too much, I think. And then his hands, his left hand has been angled down, so it will be kind of angled down like so, and the right hand will be holding a pair of binoculars. Take a little bit of putty once you mix it up. Carefully tuck it in there. It will take several hours for this stuff to set up. I'm going to very carefully put it in. Don't put in too much at once. Don't get too rough or heavy-handed. Bust a chunk out or break the arm off. Now if it seems a bit stiff, you can add a little bit of water. Like, don't hose it down, but add a little water, and you can use a brush to blend it in a bit more. I just want to make sure all of this stuff sets up inside before I add anything on top. It shouldn't crack. I have to do a lot of sculpting, like I said, and it's been quite a while since I've done anything like that, so I want the best features to go. I need all the help I can get. Sorry, I did not set up the camera all that well. Really having to tuck underneath to see anything. Now clean that up and I'll let it cure up. And this is the finished and puttied radio operator. For this guy I used Tamiya epoxy putty underneath and then some Tamiya basic putty on top and smoothed it over with liquid cement and a small paintbrush. And once this is hardened up, I'll dust it off with a little 4/0 steel wool and give it a paint job and show you before and afters. And this one was Tamiya epoxy putty on the bottom and then milliput on top because it flares in a little bit better with water, which allowed me to flare that bit in there. I don't know about that shoulder, that's a lot of space. I might try and put a seam in there, but it looks okay. It's the Commander, you won't see too much of that. As kind of a baseline for you. This was done with a very quick wipe of oils. This was brown sand with a little burnt sienna, and then most of it wiped off, kind of reverse dry brushed. And I've used this technique before. This is one of the better figures that I've done with it. Fairly basic. This is, I hadn't been doing the oils for too long when I did this guy. This guy is more along the lines of what I normally do. His eyes are a little weird, but I'll deal with that later. But this was my third go around with this figure using the acrylics, the little dapple pattern. I think it's a little stark, and for some reason I don't know how it's going to show up for you guys, but it does not look nearly as harsh in real life as it does on film or on video. And this took me, I don't know, half an hour. There's definitely a learning curve. Boy, there's a lot to learn about the consistency of the paint. I mean, when they tell you transparent, they mean transparent, like you can see right through it. And just build it up in layers. I'm working a bit on the hair. Hat's got the base color, which is Panzer Gray mixed with a little Iraqi tan. Or sorry, old wood. The driver is done but not assembled because I have to put his body in through the turret ring and up into the driver's position, and it won't work with his head still attached, so I have to wait until his body's in place until I can put his head on. But I have test fitted everything and it looks fine. The eagle on top is actually a Tamiya decal, settled down with Mark Fit Strong. That's just right off the sheet. Works just fine. Takes a while to get into place. And then there's his torso. The epaulets and the collar tabs are both Tamiya decals, but the piping around the collar is hand painted. And I didn't bother going any further than that because you are only going to see about this much of him out of the hatch, so there's really no point in doing anything below that line. Here's the finished commander. The strap for the binoculars is made out of an old metal toothpaste tube, cut to about, I don't know, 1/2 millimeter. Trying to get them so you can see inside the cuffs. It looks a lot better. The neck, sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't, but at least it gives you a chance to move things around. A good shot of Vallejo matte coat, just dulled all those decals right down. They don't even look like they were decals anymore. And of course, this is our finished radio operator. So he turned out pretty good. Straps on his binoculars are done the same way as the commander. Also on both of them I drilled out the binoculars, although I didn't do the bottom side for the radio operator. I did for the commander. And the ribbon on his lapel, I ended up having to hand paint that, but that wasn't too difficult. And the hair turned out rather nice on all of them. A lot better than the plastic glob that Tamiya give you in the box. So I really enjoyed this new technique. I'll put a link to Night Shift's tutorial below in the description for you. If you have any questions about any of the stuff I did, please feel free to list it in the comment section below. If you like this video, even if you didn't like it, just interact, please. I'd like to know what I can do to improve. And thank you very much for watching. If you made it to the end, I really appreciate it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.